Hello, everyone. Welcome to week 4. This week, we're going to cover chapter 4, the introduction to the patient record. In this video lecture, I'm going to try to highlight what I'd like you to focus on, why it matters for you as a HIM professional, and what I expect you to do after watching the slides and lecture to help you succeed on the quiz. Here are some key topics to watch for. As you work your way through the material, think about the purpose of the patient record. We always focus on patient care operations, but there are also business, administrative, and other purposes that we use the patient record for. Another thing to consider is the ownership and the format, whether it's an electronic health record or whether it's a paper record. There's a big distinction and difference between owning the paper versus controlling its access and release. Think about who owns the record. Does the physician? Does the patient? Does the hospital or healthcare organization? And think about the difference between ownership and control. We'll also get into another key topic for you to keep in mind, and that's documentation responsibilities. In addition to who documents in the record, we need to think about authentication. This includes signatures, countersigning, and timeliness. Whether you have an electronic health record or a paper-based record, we have to worry about the format, right? Are things in date order? Are they chronological? Are they source oriented? Are they problem oriented? And all these other different types of formats we can have. And then finally, whether it's paper or electronic, storage has a cost. It's much less in a digital world to store thousands of records, but whether it's paper and it's stored in offsite storage like DeliverX, or it's in an electronic format, ultimately there's a cost. So we have retention laws and regulations that cover that. We have retention policies, and health information supports these initiatives through both quantitative and qualitative reviews. Some things that I want you to learn after working your way through all the material in this chapter include being able to explain the 3 primary purposes of the patient record and identify where the specific data elements belong within the record. The other thing I'd like you to know is to recognize the different authentication rules and documentation requirements in patient records. Next, after you compare record formats, decide which format fits best in a given clinical setting. There's not a universal chart order in either an electronic health record or a paper record world. And then finally, think about the HIM responsibilities and be able to describe them, ensuring timely, complete, and compliant records. Some other things I'd like you to do once you've worked your way through this chapter, the video lectures and the slides and the reading. Review and pay special attention to figure 4-2 and figure 4-7 and 4-10 in the text. And then complete the quiz. And again, as usual, everything's due by Sunday night at 11:59. Finally, I'd like to say, understanding the key material in chapter 4 will make your life and this class and as a HIM professional much more rewarding, easier to understand, and ensure that you are providing a needed and vital patient service. Please get back to me about any questions you have on this material, and I'll look forward to seeing you online. That's all I have. Have a great week.